Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Hawa Solomon. Welcome to another edition of Parenting Today. Hope you are well wherever you are, inshallah. Sitting back, relaxing, grab that cup of tea, water, freshen up. And remember, if you have family, friends, and colleagues across the lands and the beautiful seas, you may tell them as well to join us in live via our live stream on hilaal.tv, www.hilaal.tv, and of course on our DSTV platform, channel 347. Stay with me for the next hour as we talk about the human child development. Yes, us as individuals, we were all there in utero and infancy and toddler stage, the terrific 2 stage, children, the adolescents, the young adolescents, teenagers, all of that. Inshallah, we're going to take you through that beautiful journey and its day. But before we do that, let's look at our video first off of the human development and early childhood development. Take a listen.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Shanaz Mos from Happy Confident Me. Today's parenting tips are from the 1001 Critical Days, which I first learned about in 2014. There was such an amazing talk by Professor Astridberg that it left such an impression on me. Up until today, I still remember things that resonated with me. And the first thing is that we should care about a baby's life from conception. So the 1001 days is from conception to about 2 years old, 24 months. There's the total. Because by this point, by the 1001 day, the brain has reached 80% of its adult weight. That's an amazing amount of growth that takes place, which means stimulating the brain. And children's brains are stimulated through play. The second thing I remember that from birth to 18 months, connections in the brain are created 1 million per second. So that's like exponential kind of learning and growth, but not enforcing them to learn through educational toys, but once again through play. The third thing is that a baby or fetus that's exposed to toxic stress through the mom in her pregnancy will affect their responses. Later in life, it'll be distorted to stress. So often we think that when we are pregnant, we don't need to stay away from certain harmful foods and substances and those things, but we don't factor in the emotional environment that moms are in. This is the stress that we're talking about that has a huge negative impact on baby's development. The fourth thing is that the social and emotional development of a baby is affected by the quality of the attachment relationship. So that relationship, how much face time, how much positive time, how much attention you give to the baby, plays a role in how they will show up in their adult lives, in relationships. How scary is that? And the last thing I remember was babies are disproportionately vulnerable to abuse and neglect. So babies cannot protect themselves. They need us. And sometimes, sometimes our children actually need protection from us, in that we are the harm that actually happens to them. So when you realize the power those 1001 days are, don't waste them. Don't wait for your child to be walking, talking, to engage with them. Engage from the moment you realize you're pregnant. Begin the conversations, stroke your belly, be loving, be affirming, be a positive influence from the first moment, and not when the baby comes out. From the first moment you have conceived that you're aware of, start your positive, emotional, connecting relationship. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
So there we go. Hope you enjoyed that video as we kick off the development of the human child. We all want to get to know our little ones. We get close to them even when they're in the belly of the mother. We feel them kick. They can hear us. Yes, they can, from a certain stage, alhamdulillah. But then we see them born, mashallah. And this beautiful infant, we see them grow up into a toddler. But we don't quite realize how much we can connect with that little one. Online, we have all the way from New Zealand in a completely different time zone, Dr. Zureida Khan Ali, and she's a child and adolescent psychiatrist, has been practicing since 2015, now based in New Zealand in Auckland, and she's lecturing both at University of Waikato University as well as University of Auckland, training doctors in the practice of psychiatry and specialists as well, training to become psychiatrists. And she heads the clinical teaching for undergraduates at Lakes DHB Mental Health Honorary Academy. But first, let's chat to Dr. Sudaida. Assalamu alaikum to you, and shukran so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum salam, Hawa. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope I can impart some useful knowledge.
Yes, we've been following, at least I've been following you on social media, and I love how you introduce different concepts of the growth of your experiences with your adolescents, with your patients, and using that as, little bits of antidotes just to, and I mean, for us, some of us, it might not be relevant, but for many, we are dealing with that situation, we need to understand it. So inshallah, we'll be having a series of shows with Dr. Sudaida, and we appreciate the time. I know, like I said, so if it's 8 o'clock here, it's 8 o'clock at night there. So she might be extending her time and doing after hours, at least 7 o'clock at night there, extending her hours a bit, but we really do appreciate it. And inshallah, may the community of South Africa, for the betterment of the Ummah, look at it, and as we always do, use the example of the Prophet ﷺ and Quran, which in many cases, all of these findings have already been placed in the lives of our Sahabas and the Prophets, and even in the Holy Quran, alhamdulillah. But Sudaida, as I started with the introduction, Dr. Sudaida, rather, Maf, as I started with the introduction, we understand and we see these little bodies, these infants, these individuals grow up. And even as we are today, we don't quite put ourselves back to what our parents went through when we were born, when we were in utero, when we just a little person. So where do we start to understand that human development of a child, looking at all aspects? Of course, there's the growth, there's the understanding of how the makeup and the baby, just from the little flesh that's attached to the womb. But there is the development of emotions, social skills, and all of that, inshallah, as this journey takes us. But where do we actually start?
I think it's important to start with the fact that medicine and all aspects of medicine usually concentrates on the physical aspects of health. But for me, the brain development is part of physical aspects of health, and the resultant socio-emotional development is directly linked to that. So I think it starts at the very beginning when your mother meets your father genetically. What happens with that union will determine outcomes for you. And then obviously, one of the most important concepts is the first 1,000 days of development. Right? So you spoke about the different developmental levels, and I think it's really important to understand every child and meet them at their developmental level. I'll tell you why. If you have your 3-year-old and you have a bit of miscommunication, 3-year-old wants ice cream, you say, I'll give it to you in a minute, but you meant after supper, and then you give supper first, the 3-year-old throws a tantrum, that's all good, that's fine. If you tell your 15-year-old you'll get ice cream, and the same situation happens, and they throw a tantrum, throw themselves on the floor and kicking and screaming, that's not fine. So you need to meet the child at the developmental level, right?
I wish we could do it sometimes.
You need to meet the child at I think, where does road rage come from?
Yes,
road rage is our version of it.
That's some sort of terrific 2-stage tantrum.
Yes.
Sure.
And basically, but that's an important concept as well, because when we have road rage, we actually revert back to a previous developmental stage that has never really left us and lies deep inside the brain. And over time, we can discuss those concepts as well about the layers of the brain and where we have unconscious memory. But what I want to say is that with development, it's so important to look at the different stages. Every stage is different. The first 1,000 days is a very big concept, and we'll look into that a little bit more. But if you look at the first 1,000 days, it includes in utero development, which is critical. And that's why pregnant mommies are so precious. That's why they are so precious in Islam and in the concept of life. Pregnant mommies need to be looked after really, really well. The way a pregnant mommy is looked after determines outcomes for her and for the baby for the rest of that baby's life, right? Then the first 1,000 days includes infancy as well and toddlerhood up to 2 years. After toddlerhood, we have what they call the terrific 2s, 3s, and 4s. Some people say terrible, but you need to have a strength focus, so we say terrific.
Yes.
2, 3s, and 4. And then after that, we have the preschooler, the school-going child, and then we have the preteen, the early adolescent, and the late adolescent, and the young adult as well, because we believe that children are only fully developed in terms of neuroscientifically and neurobiologically at the age of 24 if you were a girl and 28 if you were a boy. So this is all the concepts that you probably need to have a handle on if you're going to be dealing with children of different ages. And if you're having one of these, you're going to be dealing with all those different stages. So it's good to have knowledge of all of them. So I think the first 1,000 days is a very important concept. And I think if people want to Google a bit more, you can look at the UNICEF website. UNICEF is worldwide. And they have very good videos on the first 1,000 days. So when you look at in utero development, we know that from the clot, right? From the clot, you have the development of many cells, billions and millions of cells. So you have what they call neurogenesis. So this one fertilized zygote grows into millions and billions of cells. That is a miracle.
Yeah.
But when you have such an intricate process, how much can actually go wrong? But if you do it properly, how much can go right? My analogy is a high-risk portfolio return investment. If you invest right, it can go completely right. If you make mistakes, you end up paying it with it for the rest of your life. So the first 1,000 days is really important in utero and the infancy, because that's when your brain is developing the most cells, choosing which cells it wants to keep and get rid of, and also which connections between cells are going to develop.
I'm
Those
so glad.
first 1,000 days.
Sorry, Dr. Zuraidah, I'm so glad that you've stressed on this understanding, and I think one segment is definitely, or 2 segments is definitely not enough when we are going to elaborate that connection of that 1,000 days and how that mother, as you said, and we need to stress the mother, the importance of the mother and her well-being plays on the growth, the development, the emotions that are intertwined with that child and her. But before you go any further, we will continue with the first 1,000 days and the brain development, and also looking at it physically and understanding what's really happening with the baby and the mom. Just after the short break, stay with us. We continue our conversation on the development of the human child. More just after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. A very good day to you. This is Parenting Today. I'm Hawa Solomon, and remember to interact with us. You may do so via our various social pages, email, Instagram, Facebook, and also our WhatsApp line. If you have any questions, comments, and queries on today's topic, the development of the human child, us as individuals, yes, specifically the child, and we're starting off with the first 1,000 days in utero specifically. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back, Dr. Zuraidah. Are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, welcome back. All right, you so beautifully explained, and as I said just before the break, understanding the emotions that the mother is going through during that 1,000 days, the first 1,000 days of that baby, of her pregnancy, and how it does impact the child, the infant rather.
Yes, so I have a little bit of analogy about the first 1,000 days. I explain it to people about why it's so important. I explain to people, I say to them, imagine you have a house and you have a foundation, and obviously you have the structure on top of the foundation. When you have a strong foundation, and that's your first 1,000 days, and you build the rest of the house not as strong, you can always go back and rebuild the top structure on top of a very strong foundation. If you build a poor foundation and you build a magnificent house on top of this poor foundation, you might start getting cracks from the foundation into this house, and you have to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. So if you think of the critical period that is the first 1,000 days, I hope the concept of the house with a good foundation helps you picture it in your mind, right? So the first part of that is the in utero pregnancy. And I always ask people, when does your risk for any illness or brain disease start? For example, when does your risk for dementia start? It starts the day your mother meets your father and the genes mix, because 50% of your genetics is mom's and 50% of your genetics is dad's, right? And then after that, there's nature. That's nature. That's the nature part. Then there's nurture, the environmental part. And all diseases can be conceptualized as a interaction of nature versus, with interacting with nurture. So they used to say nature versus nurture, but now they know it's the interaction between the two that's important, right? So the stuff that we can control is the environmental things. So people always concentrate on nutrition of the mother to make sure that the baby's okay, but other things are important as well. For example, the emotional well-being of the mother is really important, because when we are emotionally stressed, it changes our immune system. It changes our endocrine or hormonal system as well. And one of the big hormones that increases in your body when you are stressed or anxious or depressed is cortisol. Now, cortisol is very useful. It's elevated for a short time. It helps you get your body back to baseline. But if you have chronic stress, cortisol remains raised, and cortisol affects brain development in the baby. So that's a very important concept. So mom must be emotionally well. That's the biological aspect of brain development with mom and baby.
It's interesting that you bring that up, Dr. Zureida, because I mean, I've been pregnant a few times, alhamdulillah, but never once did I even hear the guides mention anything about cortisol. There's the folic acid, there's your iron, there's your vitamins. I mean, so where does the cortisol come from in the good well-being of cortisol?
So when all of us have a stressful encounter, the immediate hormone that gets released is adrenaline. Everybody knows about adrenaline. Yeah. Adrenaline gets you ready for action. It gets you ready for fight or flight. It gets you ready to survive. But after adrenaline has done its job, everything needs to return to normal. And that's where cortisol comes in. Okay. That also gets released from your adrenaline gland, but a different part. And it gets released slowly over a few hours, and then it returns to normal.
Right.
Now, we know for people who have been traumatized or are chronically depressed and anxious, it doesn't return to baseline. And cortisol is a hormone that actually over time, if your body's exposed to it for a long time, it increases your risk for lower immunity. It increases your risk for diabetes and hypertension, because it was meant to work, but only for a short time. You shouldn't have chronic stress.
Okay.
So in pregnancy, it's very critical because it affects mom's brain and it affects baby's brain development.
All right, understood. So it's about your environment and keeping that stress levels in the middle for your cortisol to then release when it's meant to, as a stable, hormone. Okay. So you need to be not stressed, and your environment should allow you to be not stressed. But that doesn't always happen in pregnancy. Yeah.
And you are more sensitive when you're pregnant because you're having major hormonal shifts, fluid shift. There's another body forming inside you. And the connection between the child and the mother is so intricate. There's a concept called chimerism, where the mother and the baby's blood actually mix, and the genetics mix more than just the genetics that you've given to that embryo. And that's why there's this strong biological link between mothers and babies.
I've actually read, funny you mentioned that. Just this weekend I read about a condition that the mother has chronically. I can't recall what it was, something to do with the heart. But the day that she has a baby or she's pregnant, this condition, this very rare condition, actually disappears throughout the time that she's pregnant. Yes, we do, and we focus a lot on, the stresses and the conditions, the chronic illnesses that they go through, the diabetes that she could possibly have during a gestational diabetes, and all of these, the negatives. But there are some positives where the baby actually heals the body of the mom. Amazing.
And that's the chimerism, yes, because
Wow.
the baby, whatever genetics the mom has, the baby, whatever crosses over, the baby actually changes, not the genetics itself, but it causes molecular changes to the genetics. It's called epigenetics. And it happens both ways. So the baby can have a lot of healing properties, and the state of pregnancy can be very, very good for the mom as well.
Alhamdulillah. So lots of positives taken from that baby being in. It's a beautiful, mashallah. I think beautiful is not even the word. Phenomenal experience of the whole pregnancy, falling pregnant and carrying that baby, and how Allah has actually allowed that and given us as a mother, no matter the trauma, the condition, the physical issues that she might have, even chronic illnesses, still given that mother the ability to, when she is able to carry that baby for 9 months, alhamdulillah. So yeah, profoundly in such way. So now let's get into the nitty-gritties. We stopped with cortisol hormone and that hopefully being stable during the pregnancy and how it helps the baby and mom.
And then obviously mom's nutrition is very important. So things like, we know there are certain elements that we need, like folate, because deficiency of folate, it's essential for the neural development, because we start as a flat disc and then we develop into a neural tube. So that neural development, if we don't have folate, that's where the neural tube doesn't close, and it causes midline issues and the neural tube issues. So they can have spina bifida, and that makes the whole nervous system vulnerable. The other big thing in South Africa is obviously fetal alcohol syndrome. Yeah. But we obviously in the Muslim community we don't deal with that. But we have the highest rates of fetal alcohol syndrome in the world in Robertson, Western Cape, because of the tradition of the DOP system. It was very difficult to stay away from that. And fetal alcohol syndrome affects neural development and development of all midline structures. So fetal alcohol syndrome is actually a very specific syndrome where there's disruption to the neural midline development, and they can have cardiac issues and all of that stuff as well. So this is the other concept. During pregnancy, the concept of toxins are very important. So we know what toxins are that our kids in the Western Cape are particularly exposed to. Yeah. Alcohol is big, methamphetamine is big, and Dr. Silla Springer at Tygerberg has followed up kids for many years from when the meth issue started until now. And methamphetamine has a detrimental effect on development of basic things like eyesight, hearing, and then obviously significant learning issues, ADHD. So what we put into our bodies when we are pregnant, very important as well.
Absolutely. And sort of understanding the not just the foods or the drugs that is that we're exposed to, the environment and the stresses, but what goes into that food as just to, fill your tummy. Is there enough water around for that mom to eat, and what types of food? Of course, we know organic is not always available, but the pesticides and the hormones that are included in that meal, quick fixes just on the run, and how we just filling ourselves affects that baby and the development and the mom as well.
I think it's very important for us to remember that we are ecologically linked to the earth. Allah created us from the earth. That is, so when the earth is not well, when the earth is sick, we will be sick. If we don't look after our environment, we will have an increase in diseases. We see it with cancer. We see it with infective diseases. We saw it with COVID.
Yeah.
And so the link between us and the earth is very important. And the thing is, autism, a condition like autism, People have been saying, it's now founded that the vaccines have nothing to do with causing autism. But what has been linked to autism is gut health of the mother. How healthy is the gut of the mother in terms of the biotics that live there, the living organisms that live there. And so there's a whole concept called the gut-brain bio, because the gut itself has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system.
Wow.
And all our happy hormones like serotonin and the monoamines, 70% of these are made in the gut before they get to the brain. So what you eat, when they say you are what you eat,
it's exactly that.
Gut health is so important.
Yeah, it's exactly that. You are what you eat, and you just laugh it off. But to understand the chemistry and the medical, the science behind it, ya Allah, how we still need to go and learn. So inshallah, with shows like this, we can research more and pick up. And I know Google is a great finder for information, but we must also be very careful. So let's stick to the professionals, inshallah. Dr. Zureida Ali Khan is online with us, a psychiatrist, childhood and adolescent psychiatry. And we'll chat to her more after the short break. Stay with us as we continue the conversation on the development of the human child. Back in a moment. Assalamu alaikum, a very good day to you. Welcome back as we continue our conversation and just sort of understanding that our hormones, cortisol, the environment, what we're putting in our body. And just before the break, we stopped with what you are, what you eat. Dr. Zureida Ali Khan Ali is online with us all the way from New Zealand. Shukran so much to her for affording us her time, and we'll be doing a series of understanding the development of the human, us individuals. Welcome back, Dr. Zureida. Yes, not enough can be said about the emotional development, what we put in our body. We really are what we eat. So the gut health comes up there. Cortisol, the development of the human brain, understanding what happens to the mother is affecting the child. What else have we left out and we still need to cover on the first 1,000 days?
So I think what the important concept is, what is also important is that people always concentrate on the trimesters of the baby. The first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester. And I just want people to know that the third trimester is as important as the first trimester. The first trimester, you have specialization of all your organs and things, so it's really critical. But in the last trimester, you have the development of your special senses, which is hearing and your seeing and your touch and your taste, obviously all your senses, right? And why this is critical is if anything goes wrong with those things, a child who has a hearing impairment has difficulty learning. A child who has visual impairment has difficulty learning.
Yeah.
And it helps, and it affects cognitive development. So the last trimester is when those specialized functions actually mature. And if anything goes wrong in the last trimester, it can affect the child's ability to learn. Because when we start learning post-birth, the first concept that we have is cognitive development, is by a French neuroscientist called Jean Piaget. He was a psychologist. And he said the first mode of learning is sensory motor learning. You learn by hearing, touching, seeing, tasting. And that affects your development for the rest of your life. So the last trimester is as important as the first trimester. So I just want to make that concept clear.
Everything goes so smoothly during the third trimester. They call it the honeymoon phase, and you literally feel like you're sliding. I think one or two of my pregnancies, I didn't even feel like I was pregnant. So it's amazing to really understand what's going through the body instead of just saying, oh, it's such a good time, third trimester.
Yes, you still need to be careful. And that's when your baby starts hearing mommy.
Oh.
So what we found with newborn infants, so there was a study done looking at kids from the Balkan, Greek, Turkish area, American children, and they looked at I think they were 3 to 6 month olds, and they look at the response to cultural cues in terms of music.
Okay.
So what they did is they played non-rhythmic music to these babies, and none of the scans, they had like little electrodes, showed any change in brain function or excitement.
Okay.
When they played American music to these babies. Both the Balkan babies and the American babies got excited for the music. When they played the Balkan music, only the Balkan babies got excited, the American babies didn't like it. So they show that actually quite earlier on we are, but we're culturalists, not racist, culturalists. Yeah,
Culturist,
so
okay.
it's quite
From 3 to 6
so,
months, wow. Yeah.
yeah. So what the baby's exposed to is what they prefer. For example, I know that babies prefer people who sound like their mother in the first few months of life already. And you were talking about the concept of personality development. Another study in South Africa showed that at 8 months old, babies who attended quite early care, they followed some kids up over a few years, and the guys who had personality clashes at 8 months old continued to have personality clashes at 5 years old. Some people just can't get along. So these things are quite early concepts that start forming. So we have evidence of all of these things.
And how does the genes play a role in it? Because then they'll say, oh, she's like the father, she's just like the daddy from a very early age already. This is your mommy does this, and sometimes the child hasn't necessarily been exposed to that personality trait of the mother, but the father would say, "Yo, this is how your mother would react to something." So how does genes play a role in personality traits?
I think genetically there is quite a bit of loading for different concepts, because if you look at personality traits, the concept of personality is quite big. Your personality means the way you relate to yourself and to others. So before you become an adult, personality is always in development. But there are certain things like you have genes coding for certain characteristics like attention or for empathy or for self-esteem. You have different genetics, and how those things play with your environment is really important. I'll give you an example, and I'll use a very personal example. I don't mind. My older boy is a very confident boy, very good self-esteem, sometimes overconfident. So I need to rein him in sometimes and make him aware of other people and what they need. So I do that for him.
Yeah.
My younger boy wasn't always sure of himself, wasn't always as confident. And because of that, Daddy and I noted that, and we had a different approach, because Daddy was saying that I'm concerned that he won't be confident and he won't be able to stand on his own 2 feet. And I told him, he will, because we his parents. And then he laughed and he said, okay, I'll trust the process. Yes. And we trusted the process. We had the same set of rules and boundaries for both of them, but a different approach. My father-in-law always used to tell me, I've got 5 sons and they're as different as my 5 fingers. So he wasn't a child and adolescent psychiatrist, but he was a very wise man with 5 sons. So I listened to quite a lot of what he said and applied it to the sites.
Now, alhamdulillah, our parents, our grandparents, our forefathers, they had a sense of insight and intelligence that could sometimes way beyond go past the schemes of university, which wasn't available necessarily to them. So they have the university of life, and I think sitting sometimes and listening to them is like schooling in a good way. Alhamdulillah. So I must say that I kind of I relate to what you were saying through experience as well. Having each child, alhamdulillah, we're also quite a big family, and each child is very, very, very different. And I must thank the Almighty because of that, because it allowed me then to, deal with each child. But it's something that we learn in our religion as well, I think in tib medicine, or one of the medicines of the Prophet ﷺ, they talk about the child's temperament and aiding that child in that way, approaching them, giving them certain foods, that'll help actually that sort of temperament. I know it's something that we're going to discuss, but does temperament come in a very early age already, Dr. Zureida?
Yes, temperament. That's why those kids clash at the age of 8 months. Temperament is coded for. But goodness of fit, that concept is the best concept that I can think of. So you can have a very easy child with a mother who's not able to parent that child. And you can have a very difficult child with a mother that fits so well. And the outcomes will depend on the goodness of fit. And then you need to discuss the concept of the good enough mother, the too good mother, and the mother that's not available. So you don't want a too good mother. You want a good enough mother.
Yeah.
Because if your mother's too good, you never learn frustration. You never learn to dysregulate and then her helping you to co-regulate, and then you never learn to self-regulate. So kids stress and dysregulate. There are a couple of reasons why, obviously, but this is a very important concept. If you were a baby that never needed to indicate when you were hungry, for example, mom knows the baby's going to wake up in 5 minutes' time, so in 3 minutes' time, she puts the bottle next to baby. Baby will never have to ask for a bottle. Now baby grows up thinking that that's how life is, and then life deals baby a very hard blow, and then baby doesn't know how to manage that. So you build resilience by being a good enough mom. So you will make mistakes, and you need to, and that's okay, but you need to know how to repair after you make mistakes, and how to co-regulate the baby and teach them to self-regulate eventually. You can't self-regulate if you've never been co-regulated.
Yeah. So it's okay to just lose it sometimes, and then it's about coming back from that point of,
we are all human. It's about, adults need to learn to apologize to children when they are wrong.
I think you need to say that again. Say it gou weer.
Adults need to apologize to children when they are wrong. It's modeling proper behavior, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not about your ego. It's about giving your children the best outcome. Apologize when you're wrong. Teach them how to be.
Yeah, because you'd want them to apologize one day when they're wrong, and do the same with their children.
You want them to apologize now. You want them to be able to do it with their friends, with their teachers when they are in the wrong. Because we teach people that mistakes are not to be made. That's not true. You just need to know how to repair.
Okay. All right. So how to repair and how to understand what's really happening within the first 1,000 days is still what we're chatting on. Sure. Alhamdulillah, an entire show. I will go through the next bit of it just after the short break. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. We're in our last few minutes. Please do note that you can send your questions, comments, and any queries related to the topic of today's show, or any other parenting hints and tips you want to share with us. Please do send them through. It could be a good antidote for the next one that could be troubling, possibly with an issue. So any parenting advice, any sort of assistant information and understanding or questions that you have on parenting, send them via our website. You can send it on email, WhatsApp us as well. I'm sure to get it as soon as you send it. I'm Hawa Solomon. Stay with us. We're still chatting to Dr. Zudaida Khan Ali, who is based out in Auckland, New Zealand. Shukran so much for her time. And we continue the conversation on the development of the human child. Still within the first 1,000 days. Dr. Zudaida, assalamu alaikum and welcome back.
Walaikum salam.
Okay, so we're still understanding that. Anything we still need to add with regards to, and I know this is a show on its own of the 1,000 days, but what else can we elaborate on with regards to that?
I think I have to do justice to my colleagues at Tygerberg Hospital, Dr. Nusha Lashman. She did a study showing how important it is to have your mother emotionally present. So besides feeding your baby and looking after your baby, which all the perinatal nurses look after, your emotional interaction with your baby helps their socio-emotional development. You actually see it in the brain. Also, the way the mother's mental state is after is very important. So there's something I'd like the audience to look at. It's called the still face experiment. It shows how the mom's emotional face availability affects the baby's mental state. So with the depressed moms, we, as a perinatal service, we really go in and try to help those depressed moms, because depressed moms increases the baby's risk for anxiety and mood later on in life, because they have the still face that's not reactive. Baby needs emotional, because baby learns via sensory input, via face, touch, Baby needs mom to be emotionally available. So if your moms have mental illness in this stage, be kind to them, get them help as soon as possible, support the diet. It's very important because baby's brain development after birth is as important as before birth. Those synapses that I spoke about, those connections that they make both socially, emotionally, and for regulation, it forms because of that interaction with mom and dad in those first 1,000 days in the infancy period. It's a critical period. It's a very, so we have sensitive periods and critical periods. A critical period is where if you miss the critical period to develop that skill or that specific factor is really difficult to do afterwards. A sensitive period means that it's a very good time to develop a certain skill. So that's not just for language, that's for emotional development as well. So I think mom and dad being emotionally available, play with baby, show baby how things should be done. And when there is emotional dysregulation in mom, when mom is upset, we actually see the entire nervous system called the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system in mom playing up in baby as well. It's like a mirror image. And when mom is regulated, baby is regulated. So I give an example of a mom going to fetch a 2-year-old at creche. At the creche, you pick 2-year-old up and you're really tired, you had a tough day. And 2-year-old also had a tough day. And now you must go shopping because the family wants steak and you need to go buy steak and you go to the shop and baby just wants to be held because baby hasn't seen you all day, and you put baby in the trolley and you're pushing the trolley around. And there baby starts singing unpleasant songs because baby wants to be held and baby wants to be kept, and mom is trying to get done, and then baby starts screaming and mom gets irritated and says to baby, stop it, and mom starts screaming. So what's happening, baby's emotional regulation system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is up here and mom is going here, then baby goes here, and then mom goes here, and then baby goes here, and then everything is lost. So when baby goes up here, what mom needs to do is meet baby, acknowledge, and then bring baby down. But she's also tired. So, but it's so important to recognize that how much support women need to raise a baby alone is hard. To raise a child alone is hard. Through all those stages, we've spoken about pregnancy, what they need. We've spoken about early infancy, what the baby needs. We've spoken about toddlerhood now, what baby and mommy needs. They always need support. It takes a village to raise a child, and the village is in trouble at the moment. We're living very individualistic lives, but it does take a village to raise a child, not just the mommy. The mommy needs a lot of support. Teenage mommies, young mommies, they need extra support.
I mean, I'm not just talking about the new age mommies that decide, okay, they're going to have a baby on their own, because that's in the Hollywood type life, that's happening a lot. And I'm sure, understanding the necessary support that they need needs to be considered. But now, taking back like 10, 20, 30 years ago, that was the case. It was a village that was raising the child. It was us growing up in a community. When we walked down the road in the Cape Flats in the Mitchells Plain, it was safe to do so. But today I can't even send them, even though I'm not living in the Cape Flats or in a rural area, I still will not send my child, even if it's in an estate, for just as an example. There's just that fear that you have. So that difference is there. How do moms, and I'm not talking about the Hollywood moms now, I'm talking about the moms who are on their own, raising a child with a present, a not so present dad, having influences around them that is quite traumatic, abusive, and they have to carry this child on their back, go to work, drop them off at the creche, pick them up back again. They're chawing somewhere, domestic, whether it's a domestic or a lawyer, for instance. She's on her own raising this child. What emotional impact could we possibly see with that foundation not being strong enough in that child's emotional intelligence and his environment?
I think, again, the goodness of fit is essential. It will depend on how strong the mother is. And invariably, even if you don't have a father parenting, that extended family, the mother of the mother, I always say maternal aunts and grandmothers are gifts from Allah. They are really mothers who are totally isolated with their children have higher risk of poorer health and mental health outcomes. Unfortunately, that's the truth. 70% of my clinic have absent fathers. And I'm not talking about physically absent only. I'm talking about fathers who are present but emotionally absent.
Yeah.
And absent to mom. Much of my work is dyadic work between mom and children.
Mm-hmm.
Couples therapy, bringing the dad and the mom closer together. Sometimes very essential, and then also family systems. And I'll say that 40 to 50% of my clinic, the child is presenting an ill family system, a family system that's broken. And that's why the child is presenting.
So,
go ahead.
And understanding the example that you gave earlier on of the need of the baby, needing that attention because he hasn't seen mommy for most of the day. You explain the consequences and what is happening, but where can we take a step back and pleasantly look at the child's needs and react appropriately?
So I think the first thing you need to do as a mom and a dad is recognize your own emotional state at the beginning of the day, at the middle of the day, and when you're going to pick up your child. Whatever's happening, be aware that the most important relationship and interaction of the day is going to happen after you pick up your child. Are you ready for it? If you're not ready for it, get yourself ready for it. If you're really struggling and you recognize there's an issue, you need to get help. You need to get either extra support if you don't have family, you need to go to social services, go to a community group. And then also, if there's a mental health issue, you need to approach your GP or your day hospital to get help. Because if you are not if the mom or the carer is not in an appropriate mental state, the interaction with the child will not be appropriate and it will have negative consequences for that child's development.
Okay. When we look at the first 1,000 days of a child, we're looking right up until 2 years. So the terrific 2 stage, understanding that toddler, the infant. I want to elaborate, and we don't have much time. So inshallah, maybe in the next show, we can follow up on the 1,000 days and conclude because there's so much that needs to be said. So just looking at that interaction of the mother and the child during the breastfeeding stage. If we can look at from a boy and a girl child, I've often heard through the psychology of birth, that the boy infant is not born with emotional intelligence, EQ, as we often say it, but yet the girl child is. Can you just explain that concept quickly? And we've got 2 minutes to wrap up. I know there's not enough time.
So I just want to say that there are differing views around this, but girls are, on average, statistically, as the socio-emotional development is much advanced compared to boys. And that's because of the roles that Allah has decreed for us. Allah has decreed that we are His peace. He's our provider and protector, and He's got all of that in Him. And I am His peace. And so our brains are wired that way. But the socio-emotional development of the boys can be as good if they have good role modeling. But at birth, yes, it is different. And boys, you always see if you have any emotional development in a 5-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, you put them next to one another, the girl will be more mature.
Yeah.
The girl will be more socio-emotionally mature, and that's because of the brain development at birth. But depending on what happens from birth, it can go either way for girls and boys. So you want the best input for both of them, but recognizing that boys are a bit later to mature. That's why I said boys are adults at 28 and girls are adults at 24. We have a 4-year advantage on average.
So if ever you think of getting together with someone, choosing a husband or a wife, I think a 4-year gap is a good space to have.
Nice. It's ideal. You can make it work. It's goodness of it. You can make it work with any age, but that is a good concept.
Dr. Zureida Khan Ali, all the way from Auckland, joining us, a child and adolescent psychiatrist. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to you. We definitely have to now take it from the emotional intelligence, the EQ, of both the boy and the girl, the development of that. Inshallah, in our next show, we'll maybe, just touch from there. And then how parents, both mom and dad, can help with that development of the emotional intelligence and then root into social development and all of that. So inshallah, till we chat again, I hope you have a good night rest after the show, because it is nighttime by you. Salams to everybody there in Auckland and your family. And she is, as you could hear, a South African, just working out there for the past few years. And it's good to have her expertise back in SA and the rest of Africa, where we can reach our viewers as well. But as I said, you can stream on www.hilaal.tv. But again, Dr. Zureida, until we chat again, assalamu alaikum and goodbye for now.
Alaikum salam. Shukran.
There you have it, Dr. Zureida Khan Ali. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to her. And as I said, we will pick up where we left off in today's show, the human development of that young human being, infant, little one. And inshallah, we'll start off with the emotional intelligence of both boys and girls, and where us as parents can help and assist with that through the example of the Prophet ﷺ. But for now, from myself, Hawa Salman, it was great having you with us for this part of the show. Join us next time, same place. Wassalamu alaikum and goodbye for now.